Hey, Robert.
Hey, Yaron.
Happy New Year. We're in
Yeah.
January 4th, we're recording this. And so we've just celebrated New Year's. And, New Year's are always a good time for reflection about how things went in the year and what to look forward to next year. So you kind of picture's freezing a little bit. So hopefully everything will work. But so let's talk a little bit about 2022. It was for what we do, the world of finance, and looking at the intersection between finance and technology. What a year! It was pretty crazy. We get one of these like once every 10 years. We get a year like this.
It does seem like that's about right. The last time, of course, we now call the Great Financial Crisis and then the Great Recession. But it was a very different animal. And then before that, you have to go back to 2001. So yeah.
Well, dot-com bubble bursting. And before that, it was the S&L crisis. Not exactly 10 years, but once a decade, we get something exciting.
It seems like it. So everyone, put it on your calendar for around 2030.
So let's talk about some of from the perspective of Ingenuism. What were some of the interesting things that happened in the economy more broadly, and then basically in the financial industry?
Well, the two big things of 2022, because we started the year people were pretty optimistic. Technology stocks, technology investment, crypto, everything was still doing well. Off its peaks, but not in any way that caused people any angst or concern. And then, of course, that all changed. And it's hard to say exactly what the catalyst was. I mean, everyone points to the Fed's shifting its regime, but that wasn't really a mystery that was going to happen, given that inflation showed up in the fourth quarter of 2021. But maybe that was it. Maybe it was the war in Ukraine. Maybe it was some combination.
Well, it could also be the fact that, in the fourth quarter, people were convincing themselves that inflation was transitory, that it wasn't going to stay, that it was supply chain related, and it was somewhat supply chain related, but there was nothing in this. And I think the shift that happened at the Fed and in the markets is, shit, this is real. It's actual inflation. It's not just going to go away in a month or two.
Yeah, there was a lot of wishful thinking that went all the way back into mid 2021. By the end of 2022, I think any reasonable person would have shoved that aside. But of course, you could argue that the Board of the Federal Governors, Board of Reserves, the Federal Reserve's Board of Governors,
yes,
it's a group of reasonable people. So maybe that's overstating it. But the other big thing we learned, which we've been talking for a while about, what is real and what is not in crypto. Where is it going to end up? What's going to be revealed? Because crypto reinvented a lot of the financial system in new and exciting ways, and very quickly. And things rose, and then we subsequently saw fell very, very quickly. And so we found out what a bridge too far was, which seems to have been the algorithmic stablecoins. And once the bridges started to tumble, we've all been, I think, pretty shocked at just how deep the fragility went. So we saw inflation rise, and it may have been related to, but we also saw crypto tumble. And now we've sort of come full circle to where the enthusiasm about technology, the enthusiasm about progress, the enthusiasm about crypto is sort of back to square one.
And yes, I mean, the hope is that it won't last very long. In terms of enthusiasm, it might be good for the markets to kind of readjust valuations, so so maybe put crypto and some of the other technologies on a healthier footing moving forward. I think what we discovered is a lot of crypto was built on hot air, on a lot of passion, on a lot of belief, on a lot of faith, and some fraud, and some whim, but hopefully there's something underneath it all that then you can actually build a proper industry out of. I mean, we saw that with the dot-com bubble, certainly, that a lot of the hot air was blown out of that during the 2001 crash. And then slowly, it took time, but slowly 2002 and on, a real world-changing industry was built.
And it's important to note that it wasn't that there were a bunch of winners and a bunch of losers and the losers disappeared. That did happen, but most of the big winners actually showed up post the correction, the deflation of the dot-com bubble. Cloud computing, social media and social networks, the iPhone, all those things showed up well after the peak of the first bubble. So to point at, okay, crypto has crashed, it was obviously all just nonsense. That's still possible. That's one of the things I think we're going to learn this year and next year. But it's certainly not a logical conclusion.
Yeah, you can't conclude from the crash that is what's going to happen. That is the nature of crypto. And there's still a lot of value in crypto. There's still a lot of very smart people continuing to invest in crypto and continuing to hold on to their assets in crypto. People like Mark Andreessen and Andreessen Horowitz, the venture capitalist firm, still making significant investment in the space. And we talked about this in the past. They're still looking for that killer app. They're looking for something that differentiates crypto from the rest of technology and that everybody actually wants to use. We don't think that's going to be money, but it'll be interesting what it is, what kind of potential money substitute, or what kind of product it actually is.
Right, and it'll probably involve money,
yeah.
but yes, I don't think it's going to be just, oh, let's replace the payment systems. And the thing that we sort of lean towards and have for a while, and other people have pointed to, is something that is fully integrated in your life that allows for transactions, but allows for a very broad range of transactions. I think Elon Musk called it the anything app.
Yep.
And I think that is something where a permissionless, some blend of trust and verification, or what people like to call trustless, and the ability to score is very important. And one thing that we've seen over time is that anytime you introduce a system for scoring, it has in the past started out to be extraordinarily valuable, and then the value has rapidly degraded. So you look at Amazon reviews, you look at restaurant reviews, anything that is highly quantified and is easily gamed you end up with massive grade inflation, and it becomes much less valuable. I mean, it used to be that you could look at Amazon, and if it was a 4.7 ranked product, it was extraordinary because the average product was maybe 3.5. And now the average is 4.7, and 4.9 is maybe good.
Grade inflation, yes.
There's been enormous grade inflation, and having something that's more transparent and more robust against that kind of inflation would be extremely valuable for our daily lives, because we're interacting with people all over the world at this point. And the great thing about money is that it's something that can easily be used without any concern about, okay, who am I transacting with? Are they good for it? Is their money inflated in some way? But it's also one size fits all has its own downsides. So something in crypto that is more personalized, more one size fits many, and also has the characteristics of money where you can completely count on what you're getting, that there isn't any hidden inflation, that would be really invaluable.
Yeah. So, one thing we're looking forward to is to see how this all evolves in the next year. Actually, in the next probably 5 to 10 years. We might not know that much more next year. But things are good. Investments are being made. Things are going to change, and it's going to be an interesting period of time.
It is, and it's only one data point, but coming out of the dot-com boom and bust, the new and really valuable business models showed up very quickly. It's almost as if you had to clear the easy money out of the way. And of course, that's very logical. I'm not saying it's true, but I think it's true because if you, all you have to do is start a web online store, a web-based portal, anything on the web, and you can become a billionaire. Everyone's going to do that, even if it doesn't really add that much value. And if all you have to do is start a crypto exchange or create a token, or without really finding a way to add value, and you can become a billionaire, of course, everyone's going to do that. And once that opportunity is gone, then people have to start looking harder. And it turned out with the internet, there was some extraordinarily much more valuable opportunities that were hidden behind that chaff.
So looking back in last year, what do you think is going to be, I mean, a lot of technologies seem to have been brought down to size, if you will. You know, crypto came down, Tesla's gone down. A lot of the technologies that really did well during 2020, during COVID, Zoom, other companies have been revalued to more appropriately reflect kind of the value they have on an ongoing basis and the competition. I mean, at the time of Zoom was almost it. It was like, but now, I mean, we use Teams as much as we use Zooms. Other people are using lots of other things. What do you think of some of the technologies that came out of 2022? I mean, I've got some in mind that are going to be with us, that are new, revolutionary, and you know, a substantial new moves forward.
Well, that's always a difficult question. I think that it is going to be very interesting over the next couple of years, because it's hard. I think as bad as 2022 was for technology in the asset markets, it was worse because of inflation. I mean, if you think about the NASDAQ going down 33%, that's really bad. But then you take into account that inflation was 7%, that means you had a negative real return of 40%. And there's been no recession. It was simply air coming out of that froth of the enthusiasm was at a level of, I was going to say a bubble, but I hate to say that because it's a really overused and poorly defined term. And so if you look at any given company, honestly, I have no idea. You know, is Tesla come down to a point where it's going to, as a stock, it's going to do well in 2023? I don't know. I do know that they were wildly trying to make their numbers at the end of the fourth quarter, because my brother leased a Tesla in the last week of the year. And if he had waited 2 more days, he would have saved $5,000. They were really trying to make their numbers, and they didn't even come close.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying anything good or bad about Tesla on that. You know, Tesla had 40% sales growth last year, which, you know, most companies would die for.
Yep.
And they were priced for more. But if you look at technology as a whole, I think there's a real benefit to clearing out the Me Too type of investments. Oh, well, let's just start another cryptocurrency, or let's just start another social network, or let's just start another work from home supporting app, and start moving on to something new. Now, what that new will look like, you know, that's I hesitate to predict. And I'm really curious what your ideas are, because
my ideas are outside of that world, because I think that world is so well recognized and priced and valued. I don't have an opinion that's greater than my. I mean, I go back to what I think I probably said exactly last year is the same thing. I'm most excited about what's going on in biotech and what's going on in some of these therapeutics, immunotherapy. We've talked about this, and you know, there was this colon cancer study where 13 of 13 patients, 100% cured, never before seen anything like it, and they're using now mRNA technology to deliver immunotherapy drugs, and that's exciting. The CRISPR still excites me. I mean, the idea of gene splicing. So I think something that's under the radar, because we tend to be more interested, the world tends to be more interested in iPhones and stuff like that. And, you know, yet one has to get sick to really get excited about, I guess, the biotech stuff that's happening. There are real breakthroughs in the background that don't get a lot of press, that I am super excited about their potential and what they're going to bring about. So that's where I have found the most exciting things happening. The other one that I just learned the other day. Do you know that NASA launched a spacecraft that basically crashed into a moon of an asteroid to shift its orbit to test out what would happen if they had to try to shift an orbit, and it like worked spectacularly well. It was a refrigerator size. That is so cool. I mean, and it didn't get anywhere near as much press, but you know, what's that movie where they go out and they try to destroy the asteroid? It's kind of a fun, crazy.
Armageddon, but
Yeah, Armageddon. It's
there was
super
also
fun.
Asteroid.
Yeah, super stupid, but super fun. And but there's a reality. We have technology that can do that. That's you know, at least the first test proved that it's doable. And yeah, and then the SpaceX stuff is also really exciting.
Yeah, I think I agree with all that. I think that in the realm of biotechnology, it's one of those areas that it's easy to get excited about. I'm excited about. And I think the natural human tendency to overestimate what is the changes are going to be in the next year or two, and underestimate what is going to happen in the next decade or two is really present in that particular area. That we may not see, I mean, we may see breakthroughs. Like in 2020, we got the COVID vaccine, which nobody saw coming. And so it definitely could happen, but what is almost, I think, guaranteed is that there are going to be those kind of breakthroughs and even more astonishing breakthroughs that happen over the next 5 to 10, maybe even have to wait till up to 20 years, but that is going to completely change the world. And what I love about NASA,
I'm willing to accept 20 years. Beyond that, I'm
okay.
Not acceptable. Not acceptable.
20 years. Yeah, 20 years when they are able to reverse aging in 20 years, then you're going to find that completely acceptable.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And the NASA story, I did see that, and I thought it was cool. I mean, I think it's cool that they could actually hit it from so far away.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, it's hard for people's brains to wrap around the distances here, but you know, it's something along the lines of throwing a football across the country and you know, hitting the receiver's hands.
And it hit it at 14,000 miles per hour.
And you have to be
which you can't even
fast to be able to move it unless you're sending something huge.
Yeah.
And what was most exciting though is the fact that NASA did it, because I don't think in the absence of SpaceX, I'm just totally making this up, but I don't think NASA does that. I don't think that they're willing to go out and say, let's trash this. And not because they aren't willing. I'm sure the NASA engineers would love to be blowing things up all the time, but because they don't want to be trotted in front of Congress and said, why are you wasting money? You know, we have so many things we need to do down here and you're shooting rockets. And if you think about that, the process of trying to deflect an asteroid, if the first time you try it in reality, you know, outside of the simulation is when it counts, you're basically dead. And I think that's what happened. I did not watch the entire movie, but don't look up. They were trying to do something with the asteroid and it didn't work. And of course it didn't work because they threw it together at the last second. But to actually send it up and say, okay, what are we going to learn about this? But then what else are we going to learn about space and space travel and commercializing space and getting to asteroids and moving asteroids? And it's always hard to predict what lessons will be learned. And if you have one that you definitely want to learn, then everything else is going to be icing on the cake.
Yeah, and I think you're right. The SpaceX competition, the SpaceX mentality of crazy big things, of being willing to fail small in order to achieve big, that is rubbing off on NASA a little bit. So that is the beauty of having a competition over space. So I look forward to even bigger things out of space. The kind of technology coming out of that in the next few, certainly in the next few decades.
So are you a potential space tourist? I know you don't love heights.
I don't love heights. I can't imagine. Well, we'll see. We'll see. I did never say never. I think if the price was right, yeah, I mean, it would be so crazy. It would be so, special. Then, I potentially, yes. You know, if Shatner could do it at what, age 92?
Yeah.
And you know,
You're going to wait to have your age reversed at age 80, and then you'll go as a 40-year-old.
there you go. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So I think my favorite book that I read this year, the one that had the most impact on me, and was Chip War, and it's a book by Chris Miller about the semiconductor industry, and the history of it, and then a lot of time spent on kind of where we are today, and the geopolitics of it, which I found fascinating as well. And I know you read it and really enjoyed it, but it really had an impact on me. And most books don't really have that big of an impact. I mean, I find stuff interesting, but this one really started to cause me to shift my thinking about certain things. So, you know, and I think it was a combination of the history, which I didn't really know, I knew pieces of, and it's an inspiring history. It's just it's a history completely consistent with kind of all our themes around Ingenuism, the competition, what is necessary, and then, but also just the importance of semiconductors, which I don't think I'd had a full appreciation of. So I think we're going to talk about the book more next time, but maybe let's just talk a little bit about it here and then delve deeper into it next show.
Well, I had the same experience to the book. You've recommended a lot of books to me, and some of them I've loved and some of them I haven't.
Yeah.
And so I went into it thinking, you know, this is worth reading because Yaron recommended it. But it turned out to be a book that I wish I had read much sooner.
Yep.
And it is for the exact same reason that when a book gives you thoughts that you weren't having before and points you in directions that you hadn't considered before, it's a big deal. And you know, I'm always skeptical of any book that has war in the title that isn't actually about a war, because you know, we use these analogies, the war and the combat analogies in commerce and the economy all the time, and it's, I mean, it's just flat out wrong most of the time. The importance of competition is undoubtedly the case. But really, everything else is collaboration with companies, with their customers, with their suppliers. And in fact, I knew going into reading the book that there's enormous collaboration within the chip industry. The days of someone having a fully vertically integrated, someone doing from silicon all the way up to the final chip, they're long gone. And so I didn't think this was going to be a very good book, and I was completely wrong. And part of it is that the technology has really evolved past where I had been educated. So I had no idea about 3D transistors. I knew they were putting transistors in at greater and greater densities, but I had no idea how that was happening, and what kind of technological challenges that created. So that's super cool, and it's worth reading the book just for that. But where, from an Ingenuism perspective, where it gets really interesting is it's almost an edge case, in that it made me think about the situations where the fact that people are connected, not in a collaboration sense, but in a knowledge sense, which I think is really fundamental to why the world has made so much progress in the last few hundred years, that when things get complex enough, that just being connected isn't enough. So I know a lot more about how the semiconductor industry is producing the miracles that it's producing, and what the roadmap is to continue that, why Moore's law has been able to go on. But I couldn't do any of it. And I could study for 5 years, and I wouldn't be able to actually replicate what's being done. So the idea that we stand on the shoulders of giants and then reach even higher, it's still true, but in areas like semiconductors, it has really changed. And of course, this is how it always works. Right after reading the book and getting that insight and really having to grapple with that, there was a works in progress post. It was, I think it came out today, But it was about statistics. And of course, we went to graduate school, we learned statistics, and we use statistics in our research. And I feel like I have a high level of understanding of statistics. And you know, when I was reading this, I realized that it's a lot like my understanding of chips. I was trained as an electrical engineer. I know how a transistor works, but I don't really understand it, and I don't really understand statistics. I just understand enough to think that I understand it.
Yeah.
And it's something where, you know, connecting me to a statistics book or having all of the statistics that's been developed over the centuries, and there's a whole nother angle of whether even traditional statistics is worth much in the real world. But even if you say Bayesian statistics, that even being connected to all that, it doesn't really give me a mastery that would be necessary to know what to use, when to use it, and how to interpret it in every single situation. And it just makes me wonder how much more of this layer of having the information being not enough, but having to have some level of experience or institutional knowledge is necessary for Ingenuism to really produce the kind of results that we've been saying it produces.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, I mean, in the book that you realize is, for example, China has all, I think they have scientists that have all the knowledge that do, let's say, their American counterparts or their Taiwanese counterparts or their European counterparts, but they can't replicate what is being done at places like ASML, you know, the company that builds the manufacturing, the machines that basically print the chips. Because ASML relies on a network of people doing things that have certain capacities, not just in terms of knowledge, but in terms of applying that knowledge in reality. And they can network all of that. So they have another level of connection. It's not just connection of ideas. Now it's connection related to trade relationship, trust relationship. And these people are actually executing. For China to mimic that, it would be impossible. So for example, there's a story of the mirrors in the thing where they create these perfect mirrors. There's just no flaws, or the flaw is so small, it's just unthinkably small. Well, it's a company that's been making lenses for, I don't know, 200 years in Germany, with the best technology in the world to make lenses and mirrors. They're the ones making it. You can't replicate 200 years of experience at doing that. You might have the theoretical knowledge of how to do a mirror like that, but to actually build it, that requires a whole other level of knowledge that is related to experience. And for example, China doesn't yet have that. I mean, maybe one day they will, but they certainly don't have it today.
And what you have in an area like semiconductors, and I think most interesting areas, is a rate of progress that means you're chasing a very rapidly moving target. So you could probably compress the 200 years into 20 years for any individual component of what ASML does. And maybe it would take 40 years to do them all, because you could do some of them in parallel, but it would take, in 40 years, actually in 5 years, whatever you had accomplished would be obsolete. So it might actually take 200 years to catch up, not because it takes 200 years to replicate what's already been done, but because it takes 200 years to do that, plus the next 200 years worth of progress, even if you're fully informed on what's happening and able to copy it. And that's very different than when you see a company like Uber show up, and then boom, Ubers pop up everywhere around the world, the equivalent in all major markets. We saw that with eBay. We saw that with basically every online business model, because they're nice and compact and virtual, and the challenges are somewhere else. But when you get into really complicated physical items, it's a much richer study than just people being connected. I think collaboration ends up being the key, more than the connection of knowledge itself.
Yeah. Good. Well, that's a good. We'll talk more about the book, I think, next time. It's a rich book. I'd love to get in touch with the author and see if maybe we can have him on. That would be fun. Yeah. Happy New Year.
it's going to be a very interesting year. We just don't know how yet.
Yes, it's going to be, we live in interesting times, as the old proverb said. See you next week.
Thanks, Ron.
Bye, Robert.